Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. His expression shifted to a mix of shock and fury. Ryo Yagami? You're the intruder who attacked Captain Anohana yesterday? By now, the entire 13th Division of Imperial Guards knew what had gone down. The mysterious outsider who defeated Anohana and killed Mayuri Kirotsuchi in a single day. The news had spread like wildfire. And now, that same man had shown up in the 5th Division's territory. Right at the site of Aizen Sosuke's death. The implication struck Hitsugaya hard. His eyes turned sharply toward Jin Akamaru, and his voice thundered, "Akamaru Jin. So you really have joined forces with this outsider? You're betraying the Soul Society." Hitsugaya hadn't missed it. Ryo had walked in right behind Jin. That couldn't be a coincidence. Now, Captain Hitsugaya, let's not go around making wild accusations. Jin said lazily, raising both hands as if surrendering. I had no idea these 2 5th Division members were outsiders in disguise. He distanced himself from any responsibility like a true snake, clearly ready to claim ignorance even if Yamamoto himself grilled him for answers. You damn snake. Hitsugaya growled under his breath. He knew full well that without hard proof, they had no way to pin anything on Jin. The man was slippery. And still a captain. So instead, Hitsugaya focused his fury. Then we'll just have to bring him down. Clang. The sudden clash of steel echoed through the air. Hitsugaya's eyes widened in shock. He turned his head slowly, stiffly, and saw them. Ryo Yagami and Anohana Retsu. Locked in a face-off. But he hadn't seen them move at all. Not a single step. Not a single swing. What the hell? He was a captain. And yet, he hadn't been able to follow their movements. Not even slightly. Ryo gave a small, knowing smile, holding his blade casually in one hand. Still trying to stop me despite those injuries? While Oriheim had healed Anohana's fatal wounds and she herself was highly skilled in healing Kido, some damage couldn't be fully repaired so quickly. And Ryo knew that perfectly well. Anohana coughed quietly, her tone low and serious. If we let you take down another captain, Soul Society's order may collapse entirely. 2 deaths. 2 seriously wounded. In just 2 days, Aizen Sosuke and Mayuri Kirotsuchi were dead. Anohana and Zaraki, injured. It was unprecedented. Soul Society had never seen anything like this. If they let this continue, if more captains fell, the entire power structure of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards would fall apart. And that simply couldn't be allowed. Ryo, however, smiled. Relax. I'm not here to kill anyone today. Just wanted to send a little wake-up call to the kid over there. In a way, this chaos wasn't something he wanted either. It was fine for the 13th Division of Imperial Guards to lose a few captains. But they couldn't lose their presence. Their intimidation factor. The battles to come. With Huck, the Royal Guard, and others. Meant Soul Society still needed to be strong. Letting those factions weaken each other while keeping the 13th Division of Imperial Guards intact? That was what truly benefited Ryo. His gaze flicked over to Hitsugaya. The moment their eyes met, Hitsugaya's face turned pale. In a flash of flash steps, he retreated dozens of meters before finally stopping. Even then, his cheeks burned with humiliation. He'd been scared off by a glance. Ryo, satisfied, gave up on fighting and calmly sheathed his sword. His expression was casual as he looked back at Anohana. So, Captain Anohana. What questions do you have? Was it you who killed Captain Aizen? She sheathed her own sword as well, her voice calm. Ryo didn't answer directly. Instead, he smiled. What do you think? Anohana chuckled, visibly more relaxed. As I thought, it wasn't you. Aizen wasn't really a fighter. His swordsmanship was just average among captains. And you don't strike me as someone who'd waste time dueling a man like him. At that, Ryo almost laughed, holding it back with a smirk. Interesting take. How can you be so sure I wouldn't want to spar with Aizen? Anohana gave a light cough and said with complete confidence, because your next target. is Captain Yamamoto, isn't it? Before Ryo could answer, she continued, you defeated me. The top of the Soul Society's swordsmanship ranks. The only challenge left is Yamamoto Genryu's Ishigakuni, the strongest Shinigami of them all. Am I wrong? What? Hitsugaya gasped. Someone wanted to fight that monster? Wow. Sounds like I just overheard something very spicy. Jin drawled, grinning as he glanced at the stunned Momo, his eyes flickering with pity. Ryo didn't deny anything. Instead, he simply pushed up his glasses and said with a smirk, looks like I held back too much yesterday. The implication was clear. Anohana had guessed right, and he regretted not finishing her off. Even so, Anohana remained composed. Your intentions. Captain Yamamoto already predicted them. You've probably heard by now too, haven't you? Ryo lifted his eyes, silent. Anohana spoke again, this time with a hint of sadness. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. at Sokioka Hill. Rukia Kachiki's execution will also be Captain Yamamoto's answer to your challenge. Ryo's grin widened, his gaze sharp. A challenge? That old man really thinks big, huh? So he wants to wipe out Rukia, the outsiders. And me in one go? How laughable. Anohana didn't address that. Her tone turned stern. I've delivered the challenge. Now. Are you going to just stand there and watch me collect Captain Aizen's remains? Ryo turned away without answering and walked over to Oriheim. Let's go. Oriheim quickly caught up to him. As they passed by Hinamori Momo and Kotetsu Azane, Ryo spared Momo a single glance. His tone was flat. Pathetic woman. He didn't wait for her reaction. He just walked off. Hitsugaya stepped up beside Anohana, hesitant. Captain Anohana. Are we really just going to let him go? He paused. If we all teamed up, we could at least stall him until the captain commander arrives. Nope. Count me out. Jin immediately chimed in. You go ahead if you like, but I'd rather not get killed today. You. Hitsugaya glared at him. There was no doubt in his mind anymore. Jin was a traitor. A spy in their ranks. But Anohana shook her head. No, Captain Hitsugaya. You're wrong. Her voice was low. Heavy. We didn't let him go. He let us live. If we attacked, none of us would have survived long enough for Captain Yamamoto to arrive. She said with a soft smile. Not even me. Delivering the challenge was enough. Hitsugaya froze in horror. They had been spared? The realization silenced everyone. Later, in the corridor near the 5th Division barracks, Oriheim, who had been watching the whole thing play out, tilted her head in innocent confusion. Why was that girl crying over a sword? Without Aizen's Kyokusu Agetsu, all Oriheim saw was a blade. A single sword. The poor thing. Ryo let out a quiet laugh. As they passed a brown-haired boy with glasses, Ryo gave him a nod. The boy smiled in return, and they went their separate ways. Ryo then looked to the north. Towards Sokioka Hill. Tomorrow, huh? He murmured to himself. And so, the clock ticked down. To the execution of Rukia Kachiki. Chapter 36, any last words? 7:30 a.m., Sokioka Hill under the towering, gate-shaped execution scaffold. Genryu's Yamamoto stood tall, leaning on his cane as he scanned the assembled captains with narrowed eyes. Standing in line were, Soifun of Division 2, Retsu Anohana of Division 4, Byakuya Kachiki of Division 6, Shun Sekiraku of Division 8, and Toshiro Hitsugaya of Division 10. Along with their respective lieutenants. Yamamoto let out a harsh snort and struck the ground with his cane. Less than half of the captains showed up to an all-hands summons. Outrageous. It was unprecedented in Soul Society history. This many captains absent when a threat was looming. No wonder Yamamoto was fuming. Shunsi, seeing the old man's rising anger, tilted his straw hat and tried to calm the mood. I can't be helped, old man. You know Yukite's condition. He's not exactly in fighting shape. Yamamoto raised a brow, but he knew Yukite's health issues well enough. As his own disciple, he let it slide. But for the rest? He couldn't overlook it. Where are Tosen Kaname, Sajin Kamemura, Kanpachi Zaraki, and Jinakamaru? Soifun, head of the stealth force, the Onmitsukido, stepped forward and answered swiftly. 15 minutes ago, Captain Zaraki forcibly left Division 4's medical ward with the Ryoka. Captains Tosen and Kamemura are moving to intercept. As for Captain Jinakamaru, his whereabouts are currently unknown. Yamamoto's breathing grew visibly heavier. That brat Zaraki. Causing chaos even now. He didn't believe for a second that Zaraki had sided with the Ryoka. More likely, that battle-hungry maniac was being manipulated. Then his expression darkened. Why was the Ryoka in Division 4's care to begin with? Shunsei lowered his hat awkwardly. Ah, that's probably my fault. I beat him half dead yesterday and had him sent over. Yamamoto glared at him with a cold grunt. Foolish. The message was clear, you should have just killed him. Shunsei could only laugh awkwardly. My bad. Yamamoto diverted his gaze, shut his eyes, and spoke again. Have the stealth force search for Jinikamaru immediately. I want to know what he's up to. Hitsugaya's frown deepened. Things were spiraling fast. Ikamaru's blatant disappearance screamed last stage of the plan to him. And Yamamoto felt it too. Something was wrong. A deep sense of unease was gnawing at Yamamoto. Could Ikamaru already be dead? Mayuri Kurotsuchi, Aizen Sosuke. And now Jinikamaru missing too? Yamamoto cracked open an eye. Bloodlust simmered beneath. He held it back and spoke with steel in his voice, bring forth the prisoner. Rukia Kachiki. Everyone present stood solemnly at attention. Except by Akiya Kachiki, who remained stone-faced, frowning. Not long after, Rukia appeared. Escorted by 2 guards in white. Shackles on her wrists, a plain white kimono draped over her thin frame, her expression calm but tired. Byakuya's breathing hitched slightly. Shunsei lowered his hat once more. It's starting. Anohana murmured. Beside her, Hitsugaya stood silent, heart heavy. He had a feeling Sokioka Hill was about to witness a clash between Yamamoto Genryuzai and Ryo Yagami. Maybe he won't show. Rinjaku Matsumoto whispered half-jokingly, trying to mask her nerves. Maybe. Anohana replied with her usual smile. Serene, unreadable. He's coming. Hitsugaya said firmly. A man who strutted into a murder scene like he owned the place. A man who looked down on 3 captains like they were insects. That guy wasn't about to back down now. Hitsugaya's instincts screamed it. No way. Rinjaku muttered, her anxiety growing. This was the same Ryoka who'd already killed 2 captains. For all she knew, he had 6 arms and a thirst for blood. If a real fight broke out, maybe the captains would survive, but her? She wasn't so sure. By then, Rukia had been brought beneath the execution platform. The blocky spiritual shackles were locked around her wrists. The giant halberd known as Sokioku shimmered with energy beneath the platform. A moment later, Rukia's body began floating upward, cruciform, slowly ascending toward the execution point. Yamamoto didn't bother with pleasantries. His voice was low and grim. Rukia Kachiki. Any last words? Rukia pressed her lips together, conflicted, then finally said, after I'm gone. Could you please spare the other Ryoka? Her words caused a stir. Several captains turned to look at Yamamoto. He was silent for a moment before responding. Other than Ryo Yagami, the main culprit, the rest may be spared. Rukia blinked, caught off guard by the response. Then she smiled faintly. She didn't know whether Ryo would live. But if the others had a chance, then your death wouldn't be in vain. She turned her eyes to the ground below and softly whispered, Brother Byakuya. I'm sorry for disgracing the family. Byakuya's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. Thank you for everything. After I'm gone, please bury me next to sister. Suddenly, Byakuya's spiritual pressure flared wildly. In that instant, every captain could feel it. The air turned sharp, almost hostile. Soifun and Hitsugaya instinctively grabbed their swords. The lieutenants? Many of them could barely breathe. For a moment, it looked like Byakuya was about to disrupt the execution himself. What are you doing, Captain Kachiki? Yamamoto asked, still facing away, voice calm but authoritative. Byakuya stood silently for a few seconds, then replied with his usual composure, nothing. Yamamoto turned slightly to give him a cold glance, then looked back up at Rukia. Any other last words? Rukia hesitated, unsure whether to speak. But in the end, she took a deep breath and said, please. Be careful of Gisukura. The name dropped like a bomb. Everyone's expression changed. Hitsugaya looked puzzled. Soifun, on the other hand, didn't hide the flash of killing intent in her eyes. Gisukura. Anohana murmured, eyebrows arching in suspicion. Could he be the mastermind behind this Ryoka uprising? Had he been stockpiling power ever since his exile 100 years ago, waiting for this moment to strike back at Soul Society? If that was true. And if the other captains who fled with him were involved. Then this wasn't just a rebellion. It was a full-blown crisis. Byakuya's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I understand. I'll send Gisukura to join you soon. To him, it was clear. Urahara was the one who had led Rukia to this fate. Yamamoto's brow furrowed. He seemed to be lost in thought. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Then, it's time. Whoosh. Flames erupted from Sokioku, engulfing the massive halberd in searing crimson light. The sky lit up like a blazing sunset. In the fire, a colossal phoenix began to form, wings spread wide, Its cold eyes locked onto Rukia. The spiritual pressure was suffocating. Every lieutenant held their breath. So that's Sokyoku. Rinjaku murmured, stunned. Said to hold the power of a million Zanpakuto. And then, she noticed something strange. The captain's auras were shifting. Above, Rukia calmly watched the fiery bird form. She closed her eyes. Just as the phoenix was about to strike. Yo. Giving up already? A laid-back voice whispered in her ear. Rukia's eyes shot open in shock. Standing beside her, one hand in his pocket, was that all-too-familiar Rishita figure, Ryo. Chapter 37, Sokyoku, the massive Naginata. Rukia Kachiki's eyes widened in disbelief when she spotted Ryo standing just a few feet away from her. What are you doing here? She asked, stunned. But almost immediately, her expression shifted to something more complicated. No. Seriously, why would you try to save me? Ryo tilted his head slightly, giving her a sidelong glance filled with amusement. Let's just say I was curious. Are you kidding me right now? Rukia snapped, struggling against her restraints. Do you even realize you're on the Captain Commander's kill list? She was utterly baffled. They had no connection. Nothing at all. Yet here he was, standing right in front of her, blocking a blow from Sokyoku. The execution Naginata. What the hell was he thinking? If he really wanted to help, couldn't he have acted yesterday? Why show up now? Right when it's the most dangerous? Did he hit his head or something? Kill list, huh? Ryo narrowed his eyes, turning his gaze downward toward the old man below. Hard to believe someone that dangerous looks like he's about to nap like a baby. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. He wasn't deaf. He could hear Ryo mocking him loud and clear. From the sidelines, Soifan stepped forward and looked up, scowling. What a fool. Walking straight into the Captain Commander's trap. He's signing his own death warrant. Shun Kiraku adjusted his straw hat, voice low and grave. Yeah. This doesn't feel like a fair matchup. Captain Kiraku? What do you mean? Rinjaku Matsumoto asked, glancing between Ryo and the others, confused. That's when Yamamoto finally spoke. All captains. Clear the area. This battle is not one you can be part of. Everyone froze. Wait. Did he really just say captains? Surely he meant the vice captains, right? But before the confusion could spread further, Toshiro Hitsugaya turned to his lieutenant. Rinjaku, we're leaving. He still didn't trust Jinakamaru. This was the perfect excuse to go find him. Captain? Rinjaku looked flustered but didn't argue. Shunsei then turned to his own lieutenant. Nanao, head back to Division 8. Without a word, Nanao's eyes vanished using flash steps. Soifan, however, frowned deeply. Captain Commander, with all due respect. She clearly wanted to suggest that all captains join forces to bring Ryo down quickly. Captain Soifan. Retsuo Anohana suddenly cut in, her tone calm but firm. Please, leave this to the Captain Commander. But staying here will only get you killed. You'd be nothing but weeds crushed under the pressure of their fight. The moment she said that, Marikyo Omida, Soifan's vice captain, completely panicked. See Captain, we should get the hell out of here. No mission's worth dying over. Soifan gave him a death glare but said nothing more. One glance from Yamamoto was all it took. She turned and left, dragging Omida with her. Let's go, Izane. Anohana nodded to her own lieutenant, then looked over at Byakuya. Captain Kachiki, are you leaving as well? Byakuya glanced at Rukia, then turned his gaze forward again. My vice captain was injured and is resting in Division 1's barracks. I need to see him. Renji Abai had gotten hurt trying to save Rukia, and though Byakuya had struck him down, it was still part of his duty. If there was a chance for Renji to recover, he didn't mind asking Anohana for help. As for Rukia, well, maybe she still had a chance to survive. Then, let's go. Anohana said, glancing toward the direction of Central 46. As the captains began to leave, Ryo casually drew his Zanpakuto, looking up at the massive weapon above. He suddenly chuckled. So this is the Sokyoku. Said to have the offensive and defensive power of a million Zanpakuto and now wielded by Yamamoto Genryusai himself. That's interesting. Interesting? Have you completely lost it? Rukia was losing her mind. There's still time to run. Don't throw your life away for nothing. Ryo turned to her again, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. You're pretty cute for a princess. Shame you can talk. A vein throbbed on Rukia's forehead. Her eyes went wide, and her fists clenched so hard she looked about ready to punch his smug face in. But Ryo was already turning back to the old man below. Yamamoto slowly stepped forward, gripping Sokyoku's massive Naginata. Above, the flaming phoenix began shrinking, concentrating into the blade. Ready to strike. Then, whoosh, whoosh. Yukitik Joshiro appeared beside Shun Sekiraku, carrying a large shield strapped to his back. He coughed twice as he landed. Cough, cough. Am I late? Is Rukia alright? Shunsei glanced over with a strange expression. You're not late. But you came for nothing. Yukitik blinked, then looked up toward the sky. What? But. Oh, thank goodness, Rukia's okay. Captain Yukitik. Rukia furrowed her brows at his sudden appearance. Wait. Don't tell me you're also here to act all reckless? Was he trying to save her too? Seriously? Yukitik turned toward the man beside her, squinting. His brows furrowed. I can't sense any spiritual pressure at all. His control is incredible. Even among the 13 Division of Imperial Guards, Yukitik ranked high. But he couldn't sense anything from Ryo. That meant one thing. Ryo's spiritual pressure was so overwhelming, it was simply beyond his ability to detect. And that was bad. Really bad. Then, Yamamoto spoke, still facing away from them. Yukitik. You brought a spiritual tool to interfere with Sokyoku. What do you think you're doing? Yukitik flinched, slowly turning to see his old teacher glaring at him, massive Naginata in hand, Division 1 Hori flapping in the wind. He winced hard, and finally understood what Shunsei meant earlier. He really had come for nothing. Yamamoto was planning to cut someone down with Sokyoku, and here he was with a damn shield, trying to stop it. Yeah, right. That wasn't brave. It was suicide. Sensei, Yukitik's face twisted in a half-apologetic, half-terrified grimace. In response, Yamamoto stripped off the top half of his uniform, revealing a scarred and muscular body that looked anything but elderly. You two scheming brats. Get the hell out of my way. Yes, sir. Both Yukitik and Shunsei stiffened as a chill ran down their spines. The old man was pissed now. Yamamoto gripped Sokyoku tight, fire pouring from his nose and mouth like a living volcano. Then came a voice, soft and amused. Not using your own blade? Old man, that's not a good idea. Yamamoto replied without hesitation. I don't need it to deal with a brat like you. Oh? Ryo smirked. Then. Slash. Blood sprayed from Yamamoto's chest. A clean cut. Huh. Looks like you do need it after all, old man. Ryo's tone was mocking, almost playful. You arrogant punk. With a roar, Yamamoto raised the massive Naginata and brought it crashing down toward Ryo. Chapter 38. Yamamoto Genri Uzai vs Ryo Yagami. With a mighty swing of his Naginata, Genri Uzai Yamamoto brought the weapon crashing down toward Yagami Ryo, cutting through the air with a sharp gust of wind. If it had been any other captain, that pressure alone would have frozen them in place for a moment. But for Ryo, it didn't slow him down by even a millisecond. In the blink of an eye, Ryo closed the distance, his blade aimed straight for Yamamoto's chest. Just then, Ryo's eyes narrowed. He noticed something. In Yamamoto's left hand, a cane had suddenly appeared. Shing. A violent arc of sword light tore through the air, carving a deep, bottomless gash into the earth below. Standing just 20 meters away from Yamamoto, Ryo glanced down at the gash, then back at his opponent. Now, Yamamoto stood firm. Naginata in his right hand, Zanpakuto in his left. One long, one short. One for offense, one for defense. A flawless stance. Watching from the sidelines, Shun Sekiraku tilted his straw hat down and muttered in surprise. Dual blade style with twin polarity right from the start, huh? Looks like the old man's not holding anything back. That guy. He actually forced Sensei to go that far. Murmured Yukitik Joshiro, brows tightly knit, clearly uneasy. Facing Yamamoto head-on, Ryo raised an eyebrow, his tone playfully sarcastic. What is it with you old-school Shinigami and dual-wielding? Retsuo Hana hid blades in her sleeves. Yamamoto's style was all-in-one offense and defense, and even Shunsei and Yukitik were dual-blade users. Now that he thought about it, all these millennium-old captains were apparently fans of the double-sword look. Yamamoto stabbed his Naginata into the ground and smacked a hand against his chest with a resounding smack. The wound Ryo had dealt him just moments ago instantly tightened, closed up, and stopped bleeding. Within seconds, it was reduced to a faint, barely visible scar. As his injuries vanished, Yamamoto finally looked at Ryo with a low, rumbling voice. When dealing with a traitor, there's no need for restraint. A traitor, huh? Ryo's tone was still amused, but he raised his Zanpakuto, taking a thrusting stance. Tell me, who's really the one sitting on a stolen throne? Yamamoto's eyes snapped open, his glare sharp as a blade. Just what are you? A Shinigami? Or a Quincy? There was hesitation in his voice. Suspicion. He wondered. Did Ryo Yagami know the truth? The truth about the Soul King? That the Zero Division had created it from the corpse of the Quincy progenitor? Ryo replied, disappearing from sight in a blink. The loser doesn't get to know the truth. You arrogant brat. With a low growl, Yamamoto grabbed his Naginata. Flames exploded around him, erupting like a volcano. His presence was overwhelming. If you think you can defeat me, you're 1,000 years too early. The searing fire swirled upward, morphing into massive flame dragons that roared and lunged in every direction. But weaving between them, darting effortlessly through the gaps, were dozens, maybe hundreds, of Ryos. 1,000 years? The army of Ryos all chuckled at once, their voices echoing through the burning air. 10 seconds is all I need. Yamamoto's pupil shrank. For a moment, he wasn't seeing Ryo anymore, but a long-haired woman with a blood-stained blade. It was Retsuano Hana, captain of the 4th Division. A curved slash arced through the air like a crescent moon. In the next instant, a massive wound split open across Yamamoto's chest. Old man. Sensei. Shunsei and Yukite gasped, drawing their blades and preparing to rush in. Stay back. Yamamoto barked. He slashed forward with his Naginata. And actually hit Ryo. Clang. Ryo caught the strike with one hand, blocking it cleanly. Eyes narrowing in mild surprise, he said. Oh? You actually kept up with my speed? Yamamoto grunted, blood dripping from the fresh wound and soaking into the scorched ground below. Gripping his sword tightly, he glared at Ryo and growled. You copied Anohana's slash after just one exchange? That's right. The strange curve technique Ryo had just used was something he picked up from his fight with Anohana. As her former enemy and now commander, Yamamoto knew that sword style too well to mistake it. I don't like the word copy, Ryo replied with a chuckle, clearly acknowledging it. I see. No wonder he'd felt like he was fighting Anohana herself just moments ago. Narrowing his eyes, Yamamoto muttered darkly. That ability of yours. Learning instantly, bypassing years of experience. Is that your power? Not exactly. Just borrowing the strength of a certain item. Ryo said, smirking. While fighting Anohana, he'd memorized her techniques, strategy, and combat rhythm. But what really let him absorb and replicate it all so fast was the Hogyoku. As long as you believe in the possibility, as long as you have the potential and meet the conditions, you can make it real. That's the power of the Hogyoku. And Ryo had all the conditions needed to master Anohana's style. So with the Hogyoku's help, it only took him 10 seconds. That's how dangerous, and how terrifying, its power really was. Humphrey. A tool, huh? Yamamoto let out a short laugh. And in that laugh, his body bulked up, muscles swelling with spiritual power. The slash on his chest now seemed almost irrelevant. You've surprised me, kid. He dropped the Naginata and grabbed his Zanpakuto with both hands, holding it out horizontally in front of him. By now, he knew. Capturing Ryo alive was impossible. Eyes blazing, spiritual pressure boiling over, he roared, in 1,000 years, only 2 people have ever made me get serious. Then he swung his blade with full force, reduce all creation to ash. Ryujinjaka. A pillar of crimson flame erupted with the swing, igniting the very air itself. Oh crap, he's going full power. Shunsei shouted, flash stepping backwards at top speed. Yukite threw a shield-like spirit device toward Rukia and turned tail, sprinting as fast as he could. The two of them ran over 3 kilometers before they dared to stop and look back. At the center of the battlefield, Rukia, now safely shielded, was trembling, tears welling in her eyes as she whispered in despair. Somebody. Please save me. Ryo glanced her way briefly, then turned back toward Yamamoto, who now stood engulfed in a vortex of flame. His expression turned serious. That kind of power. It's about on par with a 5-digit. Yamamoto's strength had clearly exceeded Ryo's expectations. Now facing a true top-tier opponent, Ryo dropped his playful tone. One hand rested on his Zanpakuto as his eyes sharpened. Well then, time to see what your Ryujinjaka is really made of. As he finished speaking, golden red light burst from his blade. And just then, a low whisper echoed through the air, Rule over everything, by Arcadia. Chapter 39, Ryujinjaka's Bankai. What is that? Yukite's eyes widened in pure disbelief, his body trembling uncontrollably as he stared into the distance. Reflected in his eyes was the figure of a man covered in a luxurious black kimono, silver hair cascading down his shoulders, a pair of black horns protruding from his head. His face breathtakingly handsome. That man was Ryo Yagami, right after releasing his Shikai. A Shinigami's Shikai making the Zanpakuto vanish? No. That doesn't make sense. Could he be in Rankar or an evolved hollow? But there's none of that chaotic hollow energy. Maybe a Quincy? But how could a Quincy have a Zanpakuto? Yukite's thoughts were a complete mess. It was like he was witnessing something beyond comprehension. Something that didn't belong in this world. His entire understanding of reality began to crack. Shun Sakuraka was staring at Ryo too, his eyes wide and his expression just as shaken. This spiritual pressure. It's not Shinigami, it's not hollow, and it's definitely not Quincy. It's something beyond all three. You don't mean. Yukitik bit his tongue before he could say the word Soul King, but deep inside, he couldn't stop that voice in his heart from whispering the truth, that form. That's the ultimate form the Soul King was supposed to take. And Yukitik believed it. He believed it because it didn't come from his head. It came from something deeper. From that arm of the Soul King sealed inside him. The Soul King's will was jealous. It envied that man. Yukitik was horrified. Utterly terrified. But he didn't dare say any of this out loud. Because if it were true, it would shake the very foundations of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. The one who killed 2 captains. Might be the perfect Soul King himself? That was too absurd to even joke about. And yet, no one felt it more deeply than Yamamoto Genryusai, standing directly before Ryo. The old man's eyes were wide, his ancient face twisted in awe and disbelief. That form. It's different, and yet somehow familiar. Even more complete than that one. But how could that be possible? For the first time in centuries, Yamamoto's resolve wavered. Meanwhile, Ryo simply lifted his hand, getting used to the surge of power flooding his body. It was his first Shike, and his body wasn't fully adapted to the transformation yet. But with the Hogyoku embedded within him, he was confident he'd master it within 10 seconds. At that moment, only Ryo could see a different world. A world in black and white. A white night. And standing beside him in that space, draped in a purple kimono patterned with falling cherry blossoms, was a breathtaking woman. Silver hair danced behind her, 2 horns crowned her head. She was elegance and danger wrapped into one. Looking closely, her face bore a striking resemblance. About 60%. To the celestial star spirit, Shiroi Isha. The woman looked at him, her voice clear and melodic with just a hint of irritation. You didn't call me by my full name. Why won't you fully awaken my demon form? Ryo tilted his head toward her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Impatient, aren't you? You want me to go straight to Benkei, huh? Byakuya? This woman was Byakuya, the spirit of Ryo's Zanpakuto. Born from a fragment of a divine power left behind by Shiroi Isha, fused with his own soul. She was also the embodiment of a desire buried deep within Ryo's heart. Childish. Byakuya replied with a cool glance before fading away, but not before leaving one final, annoyed whisper in his ear. Back in the real world, Ryo rolled his neck, somewhere between amused and disappointed. So this is the power of a demon lord who rules over all creation. Gained through Shike, huh? Transforming himself into a being who could shake the heavens and control all existence. This was the ability granted to him upon releasing Byakuya. And yet, despite its overwhelming strength, it still felt lacking to Ryo. Because deep in his heart, he longed to be like the peak form of Shiroi Isha. The one who governed the total mass of the universe and reigned over all mythologies as the ultimate celestial star spirit, but that was just a fantasy. A desire that could never be fulfilled. With a Hogyoku and Byakuya's power, he had pushed himself from a near-godly human into a demon lord whose strength could rewrite the world. But even that had its limits. Guess I got a little greedy. Ryo muttered with a sigh. Then he turned his gaze to Yamamoto Genryusai. Ready when you are, Yamamoto. Yamamoto didn't speak. He just tightened his grip on Rijinjaka. Concentrated spiritual pressure surged through the blade as he struck forward with terrifying speed. It was his fastest move. Quick, brutal, decisive. He didn't hesitate to use it against Ryo. Whether it worked or not, it was both a probe and a potential killing blow. Clang. 2 fingers reached out midair and caught the blade. Foolish. Yamamoto roared. Not just a battle cry, but a technique designed to shake the enemy's spirit. At that moment, compressed spiritual pressure exploded from Rijinjaka in the form of searing red flames. An inferno that pierced the sky and evaporated the clouds above. Did it work? Shunsei muttered from the sidelines, eyes narrowed. Yukitik's breathing was labored, his illness worsening as the Soul King's will stirred within him. But he didn't look away. Moments later, his eyes shot open. Sensei. Run. What? Yamamoto's eyes darted around in confusion. And then. R.I.P. His left arm was gone. Floating a dozen meters behind him, Ryo slowly turned his head, his voice flat. Your flames were underwhelming. Yamamoto didn't respond. Sweat poured down his face as he clutched the bleeding stump. My Rijinjaka couldn't even scratch his defense. Ryo raised his hand again. The red flames swirling around Yamamoto suddenly surged toward him. Like birds returning to a phoenix. Before flowing directly into Ryo's palm. And then came his cold verdict, a servant. Dares raise his blade against a king? Ryujin Jaka's power wasn't stolen. It was overwritten, subjugated. Yamamoto realized the terrifying truth in that instant. You're Shikai. You can control fire? He shouted, shaken. Shallow. Ryo chuckled darkly and vanished. Only to reappear behind him. The move was Sonito, a secret technique only the highest class hollows could perform. Even space bends to my will. As he spoke, his hand came down in a chop like a divine blade. But he hit nothing. Looking down, Ryo saw nothing but a discarded captain's hori. He turned, narrowing his eyes at Yamamoto in the distance. Excuse me. Yamamoto muttered. Didn't think this old man was that easy, did you? His severed arm pulsed and twitched, sealing the wound. He clenched Ryujin Jaka tighter than ever, voice sharp as steel. I've lived over 1,000 years for a reason. Bunkai. Zanken no Tiki. With a roar, flames erupted once more. A weathered black katana formed in Yamamoto's hand, radiating terrifying heat. Zanken no Tiki, South, Kakaju Manakushi Daisojin. The blazing inferno gave birth to an army of blackened skeletons. Ashes of ancient warriors, all slain by Yamamoto himself, rising once more under his command. Oh? Interesting. Ryo smiled faintly as Yamamoto disappeared into the flames. Stalling for time? To build up power? Then his expression turned icy. Typical move. For the weak. The battle against the oldest Shinigami had entered a war of attrition. Meanwhile, far below at the base of Sokioka Hill, the original protagonist, Ichigo Kurosaki, finally arrived, fashionably late. Chapter 40, Aizen appears again at the very base of Sokioka Hill. Ichigo Kurosaki had just finished his training when he rushed over, only to freeze in place, staring up at the sky in pure shock. His body trembled involuntarily. These two spiritual pressures. The sky was practically swallowed by a crimson inferno. And within that raging blaze, skeletal figures appeared, swarming like they were trying to attack something. Only to be annihilated in an instant. They were wiped out like weeds underfoot. What are those things? Even from a distance, just sensing the spiritual pressure from those skeletal beings made Ichigo's scalp tingle. Each and every one of them radiated a presence strong enough to completely overwhelm him. Monsters. Undeniably. And yet, they were being crushed. Effortlessly. En masse. What the hell is up there? For the first time, Ichigo genuinely doubted himself. Could he really save Rukia? With pressure like that in the air. Something that felt like staring into the abyss. Did he really stand a chance? That's when a familiar black cat appeared beside him and spoke. Having second thoughts, kid. If you wanna give up, you could just sit tight and wait for the execution to finish. Shioi Yoruichi, in her cat form, half sighed, half smirked. Sometimes, knowing your limits is its own kind of strength. At that, Ichigo clenched his fists and his eyes reignited with determination. I didn't come all this way because I could. I came because I had to. Even if I die fighting those two monsters up there, I'm still going to save Rukia. He pushed forward again, his legs regaining their strength as he started moving with purpose. Hey. Not bad, aside from the suicidal bit. Yoruichi muttered, impressed. Then she glanced up at the sky, her expression mixed with dread and awe. To think someone could actually push old man Yamamoto this far. Suddenly, she turned her head, ears twitching. Someone else was approaching. Soifan stood there, her face a mix of shock and fury. Well. Long time no see, Soifan. Yoruichi raised a paw in greeting. Soifan looked past her, at Ichigo's back, then snapped through gritted teeth, you've fallen, Yoruichi Shioin. Ah, figured you'd say that. Yoruichi leapt up onto a nearby pillar, smiling playfully. Come on, let's go. I'm not letting you get in Ichigo's way. Soifan's face hardened, her expression unreadable as she threw Yoruichi a cold glance, then reluctantly followed her. Ichigo noticed, but didn't say anything. He had no time to waste. He headed straight for the steps of Sokioka Hill. Just then, a surprised voice called out from below the stairs. Kukurosaki-kun? Orihime? You're alive. Ichigo turned, his face lighting up with joy. Yeah. Orihime laughed awkwardly, not sure how to respond. You're alive? That's kinda harsh. Standing beside her was a calm, soft-spoken girl with pale hair. Lady Orihime, she said. I don't recommend ascending Sokioka Hill at this time. Ichigo eyed her suspiciously. Who's she? She's a new friend of mine. Orihime answered quickly. Anyway, Kurosaki-kun, Rukia's just up ahead, right? You're going to save her, aren't you? She's up there? Ichigo looked toward the sky, where monsters clashed with godlike force. He clenched his teeth. You're right. I don't have time to waste. If I wait any longer, those two spiritual pressures might crush her. Without another word, he bolted up the stairs, waving behind him. Catch you later, Orihime. Be careful. Orihime smiled, waving back, then sighed and turned to the girl beside her. Ms. Nemu, how much longer do we have to wait? Nemu bowed slightly. Per my master's orders. We move once the battle above concludes. I see. Orihime looked back at the burning sky, speechless. Halfway up the hill, Ichigo stopped in his tracks. There, by a massive stone pillar, Renji Abarai lay bloodied and unconscious on the ground, freshly bandaged. Standing beside him, as clean and composed as ever, was Byakuya Kachiki. Byakuya turned calmly as he sensed Ichigo's approach. So. It's you. Byakuya Kachiki. Ichigo grabbed Zangetsu, his expression fierce. You here to stop me too? Byakuya was silent for a moment. Then, flatly, you're too late. What? Ichigo's eyes widened. Then he snarled. What did you do to Rukia? She doesn't need your help anymore. Cut the crap. Ichigo drew Zangetsu in one smooth motion. I will save her. Byakuya's brow twitched. He unsheathed his Zanpakuto, speaking in a frigid tone. Fine. Before I go deal with Urahara Kisuke, I'll take some interest from you. Rukia's situation had left Byakuya simmering with rage. Seeing Ichigo, a known associate of Urahara and someone who wouldn't listen to reason, only made it worse. He narrowed his eyes and calmly stabbed his sword into the ground. Better knock some sense into you before you run off to die. Bunkai. Senbon Sakura Kage Yoshi. Ichigo gripped his blade with both hands. I'm not the same as I was yesterday. An ill-fated, yet inevitable battle began. Elsewhere. The trail of Rishi particles on Okamarujin ends here. Toshiro Hitsugaya halted in front of a massive sealed building. The central 46 chambers. His expression darkened. What the hell is Jin planning? As he pondered, a sudden chill ran down his spine. He looked north, eyes wide. That spiritual pressure. The captain commanders released his Zanpakuto? And the one clashing with him. It's even stronger? Two monsters. Hitsugaya cursed under his breath. But then something else caught his attention, and his eyes shot back to the building in front of him, face filled with shock. That's Momo's spiritual pressure? Inside the central 46. Without hesitation, he slashed open the doors and charged in, ignoring all protocol. Before he could even reach the main chamber, he stopped at the entrance to the inner corridor. Eyes wide with disbelief. Captain Aizen? Aizen Sosuke adjusted his glasses, flicking blood from his hand. He smiled warmly. Oh, Captain Hitsugaya. It's been a while. Chapter 41, Time is up, Captain Aizen. Why are you here? Toshiro Hitsugaya's voice was a mix of shock and fury. Then his sharp eyes caught sight of something behind Aizen. A body lying in a pool of blood. Flash with the swift flash steps, he appeared beside the fallen figure, and his pupils shrank in horror. Momo. Lying there, barely recognizable, was Hinamori Momo. Aizen turned his head slightly, still wearing that calm, unsettling smile. Ah. Sorry you had to see something so unpleasant. I should have just made her ashes. Ah. Aizen. Hitsugaya roared, drawing his Zanpakuto. I'll kill you. I'd advise against bluffing like that. Aizen said casually, still smiling. It only makes you look weak. Spiritual pressure exploded from Hitsugaya like a blizzard. Bunkai. Daiguren Hiren Mauru. Blue ice crystals surged behind him, forming massive wings as his Bunkai took shape. Sword in hand, he lunged at Aizen with a cry of rage. And at that exact moment, Aizen calmly slid his blade back into its sheath. Splurt. Blood sprayed. Hitsugaya's arms flew off his body, severed in an instant. How pitiful. Aizen said, sounding more disappointed than triumphant. A single emotional outburst and you've already lost your composure. I overestimated you, Hitsugaya. Hitsugaya's body hit the ground with a dull thud, blood pooling around him. Standing nearby, Jin Ikamaru, who'd been pretending not to exist, let out a faint chuckle. Well, looks like we've been discovered again, Captain Aizen. From the corridor behind them, Anohana Retsu appeared, walking calmly beside a stunned and silent Kotetsu Aizen. You really fooled everyone, didn't you? Aizen Sosuke. Anohana walked right past Aizen and began healing Hitsugaya and Momo, while Aizen simply adjusted his glasses. This world was built on lies from the start. You deceive, I deceive. It's only fair. As Anohana worked, her eyes swept over the devastated remains of the central 46 chambers, strewn with bodies. So. You're done hiding, then? There's no point anymore. Aizen turned his back without urgency. Jin. Let's begin. With a smirk, Jin released a flurry of bandages and invoked a space transfer Kido. The two vanished. Bound for Sokioka Hill. Anohana sighed softly. Izane, alert everyone. Izane nodded and quickly activated a wide-range broadcast Kido. Attention, everyone. Former 5th Division Captain Aizen Sosuke and former 3rd Division Captain Akamaru Jin have betrayed the Soul Society. They are currently en route to Sokioka Hill. All divisions are to engage and apprehend immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sokioka Hill. Yamamoto, his body covered in severe burns, looked up toward the sky, sensing something. Aizen? Akamaru? Behind him, a figure appeared. Ryo Yagami. Wearing a smirk. Looking for someone? Without warning, Ryo's hand pierced through Yamamoto's chest. But, did you really think I'd drop my guard so easily? Yamamoto roared. Zanken no Tiki, North. Tenshai Kaijin. His blade ignited with terrifying force, spirit energy condensing into a cataclysmic slash meant to cleave Ryo in two. The strike descended like divine judgment. But it hit nothing. Yamamoto's eyes widened. 20 meters behind him, Ryo stood perfectly unharmed. Tsuzumi. Pretty handy, isn't it? He mocked. Shame you didn't expect me to use your own escape trick. You. Arrogant bastard. Even Yamamoto, the strongest Shinigami, seethed with fury at being fooled by his own move. Slash. A deep gash tore across Yamamoto's chest. Damn you. He staggered back, healing himself with Kido, prepared to go out with a bang if he had to. But Ryo didn't press the attack. Instead, he twisted aside just in time to dodge a surprise stab from Shunsei Kiraku. Oh, guess I've been spotted. Shunsei sighed. Ryo responded with a palm strike. No contact, just air pressure. Yet the force of it created a brutal shockwave that slammed into Shunsei, nearly slicing him in half. From behind, Yukitik Joshiro emerged, casting Bakudo number 61, 6 rods prison of light. To bind Ryo in place. Now! Yukitik shouted. Soifun and Shioi Nyoruichi appeared, lightning fast, activating Shunko as they aimed for Ryo's limbs. Byakuya Kuichiki joined the fray, scattering Senbon Sakura like a deadly Sakura storm. Above, Kamemura Sajin's Bankai. Kakujo Tenjin Mayu. Brought down a massive blade toward Ryo's head. But amidst the chaos, Ryo just smirked. How laughable. He flexed his arms. Shattering Yukitik's binding spell in an instant. Yukitik coughed blood violently. In the same motion, Ryo's hands clamped around Soifun and Yoruichi's throats, the crushing force nearly snapping their necks. Then he looked up. And headbutted Kamemura's massive blade. With a thunderous crack, the weapon shattered like glass. By the time Byakuya Kuichiki's petals closed in, Ryo had already vanished. Sonido fast. He reappeared behind Byakuya Kuichiki and delivered a brutal kick that sent the captain crashing into the ground. In less than 3 seconds, 6 captains had been taken out. And just as victory seemed certain, Ryo felt something. An ominous premonition. Looking down, he saw the person in his grasp was no longer Soifun. It was Yamamoto. Tsuzumi switch. Got you. With a roar, Yamamoto drove Zanken no Tiki toward Ryo's heart. Clang. A deafening metallic ring echoed through the sky. Yamamoto's eyes went wide in disbelief. Ryo smiled coldly. You think I didn't notice the spatial distortion just now? Then take this. Yamamoto shouted. Zanken no Tiki, East. Kyoku Jitsujin. 20 million degrees of solar heat channeled through his blade, all his spiritual pressure compressed into a point and fired at Ryo's chest. And then, the flame was claimed. The immense heat of Zanken no Tiki vanished as Ryo took control of it with ease. Ryo sneered. Trying to play with fire. In front of me? How foolish. For the first time, Yamamoto felt completely powerless. He finally understood. From the very beginning, he never had a chance. Even the strongest fire-type Zunpacto, Ryujin Jakka, was powerless before the being standing before this Ryo Yagami. No. Not powerless. There was still a chance. If he self-destructed. Burned everything, including himself. Ryo would have to suffer the consequences too. Even a god couldn't walk away unscathed from a suicide blast of that scale. A flicker of resolve sparked in Yamamoto's eyes. But then, a calm voice cut through the tension. You can stand down now, Ryo. Our goal is already achieved. Yamamoto turned sharply. Aizen stood before Rukia, holding a glowing, multifaceted jewel. The Hogyoku. A strange tree had sprouted from Rukia's abdomen, withering as they watched. Fascinating. Aizen mused. This technique doesn't even harm the host. Ryu Yagami. Ha ha ha. Come fight me already. Out of nowhere, Kenpachi Zaraki burst onto the scene, laughing madly, eager for battle. Wow, someone slipped through the net. Aizen remarked as he waved Kyoku Suigetsu. Splurt. Kenpachi blinked in confusion. He wasn't facing Ryo Yagami. He had just sliced Yamamoto. Time is up. Aizen's voice was cool and final. Ryo raised an eyebrow just as Mayuri's daughter, Nemu, appeared beside him. That fast already? Ryo murmured, knowing the rendezvous window had arrived. Rip. The sky over Soul Society tore open. And from the rift, the faces of the hollows emerged. Chapter 42, I will stand atop the heavens. A massive golden pillar of light burst from the heavens, piercing the sky like a divine lance. It was negation. A technique used by hollows to protect allies by calling upon the power of Hugomundo. Once under its influence, you were essentially in Hugomundo itself. Trying to strike through it was like trying to grasp something across an uncrossable void. The light engulfed them all. Aizen Sosuke, Jin Ikamaru, Kaname Tosen, Ryo Yagami, and Nemu Kurotsuchi. In a single instant, all five vanished within the veil of the negation. Ugh! Genryu's Yamamoto coughed up a mouthful of blood. Yet even in his battered state, he looked warily at Ryo, who now floated gently in the air. That's it? His voice was strained, filled with disbelief. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the strongest Shinigami had tasted defeat. Bitterness. Pain. Rage. They churned in his heart like a storm. Only now were the vice-captains rushing onto the scene. Only to freeze, stunned by the devastation before them. Inside the shimmering gold light, Jin glanced down at Rengeku Matsumoto and the others, then smiled lazily. Ryo-sama, Aizen-sama. Why not just finish them all off in one go? No time. Ryo replied without even looking at him. His eyes were fixed on Division 1's headquarters. On the rooftop stood the full force of the Royal Guard. 0 Division. 5 members, all watching them intently, each one radiating oppressive spiritual pressure and covered in gear crafted by the Soul King himself. Jin's smile twitched. They've all shown up, huh? Ryo said calmly. Aizen smiled. We've lost our reason to keep fighting. They didn't need to say it out loud, but Jin understood, striking now would just hand the victory to someone else. They'd only be doing the Royal Guard's job for them. Still looking down at the battlefield, Jin smirked again. Come to think of it, most of the captains were taken down by you, Ryo-san. Ryo glanced sideways at him. Huh. Jin immediately shut up. The last thing he wanted was for Ryo to slice him up in Hugomundo for talking too much. On the ground, Yukitake Joshiro had finally managed to stand. Bloodied but upright, he fixed Aizen with a conflicted gaze. You've fallen so far, Aizen. Have you truly gone rogue? Gone rogue? That's a laugh. Aizen replied, removing his glasses with a casual flick. No one stood at the top to begin with. Neither you, nor me, nor the gods. But the unbearable vacancy of the throne in the sky ends now. He crushed his glasses in his hand, brushing his hair back in one sweeping motion. Cold, regal, and distant, he looked down at the Shinigami like they were insects. From now on, I will stand atop the heavens. Yukitake's pupil shrank as the horrifying realization struck him. He wants to replace the Soul King. And just then, bleeding, limping, and late as usual, Ichigo arrived on the scene. He looked up at the people floating in the sky, utterly speechless. On the ground, Orihime and Rukia, who was being helped up by Rengeku, looked skyward. All eyes were locked on Ryo. Aizen turned slightly toward Ryo, letting out a quiet chuckle. Nothing you want to say to them? Ryo raised an eyebrow. His gaze settled on Orihime as a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Now that you mention it. I never did show you what I really look like, huh? As he spoke, the divine shell around him crumbled into fragments, disappearing like stardust. And finally, his true form was revealed. Black hair. Dark eyes. Handsome and proud, standing tall above the earth like a sovereign. Orihime's eyes widened, her gaze locking onto his face. Rukia frowned. Her expression was puzzled, her thoughts unclear. To this moment, she still didn't know why Ryo had saved her life. And then, Ryo's black eyes swept over the people below. His voice was cold, resolute. Listen well, Soul Society. This world you've built on lies. Its end is coming. The false gods will fall, and the gaze of true divinity will descend from the true heavens. Wait for it. Wait for the moment of revolution. Aizen didn't say a word. He simply smiled, watching the confused masses below like an amused god peering into a zoo. He chuckled softly. Ryo, you're being dramatic. They're just lower beings in the end. Ryo smirked and shook his head. Guess hanging around you too long has made me a bit of an edgelord. I even got some of your arrogance. Ooh, congrats. A true king carries himself like one. Aizen replied calmly. Their words faded as the negation slowly vanished from the sky. Sokioka Hill. The battlefield was covered in the wounded. Anohana and Izane arrived at the scene, immediately jumping into action. Captain Kiraku, please don't move. Captain Yukitake, can you support yourself for a bit? I'll manage. Cough cough. Captain Byakuya, how are you holding up? 5 broken ribs. I'll live. Good. I'll start by healing Captain Yamamoto. Anohana turned, noticing Ichigo standing frozen in the middle of the chaos. Excuse me, Ryoka boy. Mind stepping aside? Huh? Oh. Right. Ichigo quickly backed off under the weight of her gentle but deadly smile. She walked over to Yamamoto, who was already receiving healing from Orihime. Anohana didn't interrupt. She simply stood there and spoke. What a disaster. And to think. You even called in the Royal Guard. That's surprising. Before the battle, Yamamoto had heeded her advice and requested backup from Zero Division. Something nearly unthinkable. But even now, they hadn't lifted a finger. The implications were chilling. Even Anohana, with all her experience, felt uneasy. Yamamoto didn't respond. His eyes remained fierce, unreadable. Seeing this, Anohana's lips curled up slightly. He's still got fire left in him, at least. She chuckled softly. So? What's it feel like, losing to the monster I helped create? Ryo's swordsmanship came directly from Anohana. Calling him her successor wouldn't be far off. It was because of her that Ryo Yagami could fight Yamamoto evenly. And when? Yamamoto's reply was barely a whisper. If only. If only he were Shinigami. He stared silently toward the sky, toward the place where Ryo had disappeared. Anohana's eyes narrowed. She let out a faint sigh. Yeah. If only. An old man needed space to wrestle with regret. She wouldn't take that from him. Instead, she looked over at Orihime and smiled kindly. That's some incredible healing. What's your name? Orihime Inoue. She answered quickly. Just then, Yamamoto turned to Orihime and asked sharply, why didn't you leave with that man? Orihime flinched, nervous. Ryo said if you died, all the rats would come crawling out. It was a jab at the Royal Guard and Huck, who only dared to stay in the shadows while Yamamoto still stood. Humphrey. Twin streams of flame shot from Yamamoto's nostrils. So he sees me as his guard dog, huh? Orihime didn't reply, just shrank back a little and continued healing him. But her thoughts were elsewhere. On Ryo's final words to her. You'll take my place. Use your eyes to really see Soul Society and the human world. She didn't understand completely. But maybe she was beginning to. Then Yamamoto looked down at his left hand. Already showing signs of healing. He narrowed his eyes. Girl. I owe you one. Soul Society still needed his strength to maintain order. This one restored hand meant everything. Huh? Orihime blinked. Then her eyes widened in realization. So this was the reason Ryo made her stay behind? Even this. He had already planned? Orihime's heart twisted with an emotion she couldn't name. Chapter 43, Out of Bleach. While Orihime Inoue was treating Captain Commander Yamamoto's injuries, Rukia Kachiki, helped along by Rinjaku Matsumoto, walked over with a worried expression. Orihime. Where are Ishita and Chad? Rukia couldn't help but ask about the classmates who had come to the Soul Society to help rescue her, yet were nowhere to be seen. As for Ichigo Kurosaki? That idiot was just standing off to the side, completely spaced out. She already thought he wasn't smart to begin with, but now, looking at that dumbfounded expression of his, she figured his condition might have gotten worse. Orihime turned her head at the question, looking awkwardly toward Captain Anohana. Ever since she'd started following Ryo, she'd been told her friends were safe. But in truth, she didn't really know where they were or what had happened to them. Anohana gave a gentle nod. They're alive. Last I heard, they're in Division 4's medical bay. They're okay? That's a relief. Orihime breathed out a long sigh, visibly relaxing. Nearby, Kiraku Shunsei chuckled while gently pressing a hand to one of his wounds. The big guy, Chad, was under my protection. As for the Quincy kid, I think they found him over at Division 12. He then shook his head, adding with a hint of regret. Still didn't expect Lieutenant Nemukuro Tsuchi to turn traitor. Shame too. She was a real beauty. Clearly, Shunsei Kiraku was feeling conflicted about it. How could a woman like that fall in with the enemy? Joshiro Yukitake let out a soft sigh. Poor Captain Mayuri. Died for nothing. Dead, his daughter defecting to the enemy. If that's not tragic, what is? Wait, Captain Mayuri is dead? Rukia's eyes widened in shock. This was the first she'd heard of any captain dying. Weren't they just dealing with a few Ryoka? How the hell did a captain end up dead? Yukitake nodded solemnly. Luckily, he's the only one. Then he paused, realizing how that sounded, and forced an awkward smile. It made it sound like Mayuri was somehow special, which really wasn't the point. Just then, despite still not being fully healed, Yamamoto narrowed his eyes and growled, "Once this is over. Kiraku, Yukitake, Soifun, Byaku Yakuichiki." The captains immediately turned toward him at the sound of their names. Yamamoto continued, his tone like thunder, "When your injuries have recovered, lead your divisions to the world of the living. And bring Kisuke Urahara back into custody. If he resists, kill him on the spot." Byakuya responded without hesitation. "Understood." Shunsei and Yukitake exchanged glances, then both looked over to Yoruichi Shioin, who stood nearby, clearly uneasy. Yamamoto's eyes followed theirs, settling on Yoruichi. "Given your contribution in the recent battle," he said, "your past offenses will be forgiven. Don't throw that away." Yoruichi's scalp tingled, but she knew this wasn't the time to argue. Yamamoto had made up his mind. So she raised her hand decisively and declared, "I know where Urahara is. I'll lead you there. Better him than me." Yoruichi understood perfectly. With Mayuri dead, Division 12 had no commanding officer, and Urahara, once a criminal, was now squarely in Yamamoto's crosshairs. If they weren't going to execute her, she had no reason to rebel. This wasn't the old days anymore. Yamamoto was pissed, and if he really lost his temper, both she and Urahara could be toast. As for what would happen to Urahara Kisuke, Yamamoto probably wouldn't kill him outright. Not while Ryo and Aizen were still in play. But punishment? That was definitely on the table. At that moment, Anohana spoke up. "What about the Ryoka?" Yamamoto turned, his gaze shifting between Oriheim and Rukia. After a moment of silence, he said, "Given that all of this was set into motion by Ryo and Aizen's schemes, we will not hold the Ryoka accountable." Rukia's face lit up in pure joy. With that issue settled, Yamamoto clearly had no interest in continuing the conversation. He turned towards Soifun and said, "Soifun. From this moment on, Division 2 is to launch a full investigation into the movements of Ryo Yagami, Aizen Sosuke, Jinikamaru, and Kaname Tosen. I want to know exactly what they've been doing in the Soul Society and what their true objective is." "Understood?" "Yes, sir." Soifun responded sharply, taking the assignment without hesitation. As this was happening, Yamamoto turned his gaze toward Division 1's direction. Specifically, the place where Division 0 had once stood. His eyes narrowed again, lost in thought. Nearby, Ichigo Kurosaki stood there, dazed and unsure of what to do. He watched Oriheim tirelessly treating the captains, winning their trust and goodwill like it was nothing, quietly prepping for her future here. He saw Rukia walk over to Byakuya, bowing her head like an embarrassed child, apologizing over and over. Byakuya responded with a gentle pat on the shoulder. Brotherly approval, just like that. He also saw Renji bawling like a baby the moment he saw Rukia again. Tears, snot, the whole 9 yards. Only for her to immediately back away like he was contagious. And just like that, a strange sense of loneliness washed over Ichigo. But just as quickly, the feeling faded. Rukia was safe. Everyone was safe. That was all that mattered. With that in mind, Ichigo finally allowed himself to relax. All that was left now was to wait for the journey home. Yukomundo, Las Noches Rio stood high atop a tower in the White Palace, clad in a pale uniform, looking out over the endless desert below. Aizen walked over, standing beside him, his eyes scanning the view as he spoke. "The research on the Hogi-Oku and the Okayanki is going to take time. If we also want to study the structure of the 3 realms and prepare for what comes next, it could take decades. Maybe even 100 years. Ryo raised an eyebrow, then after a moment's thought, replied, "I get it. I'll search for a way to stabilize the 3 realms through the little garden." Aizen smiled faintly. "In that case, the rest of the work might take only 6 months. Still too long." Ryo muttered with a sigh. He wanted to complete the observation quickly, but no matter how strong he was, time remained the one opponent he couldn't beat. He pulled out his pocket watch and looked at the number on the dial. 9. That spike in influence had come from revealing his true identity to the Soul Reapers and their precious protagonists. But those last 3 points? They'd likely have to come from the Soul King himself. From a true, world-shaking revolution. Ryo narrowed his eyes and murmured, "I can only stay here for 11 more days. It's not enough. I'll get you whatever you need." Aizen offered calmly. "No need. Nemu can handle it." Ryo replied, shooting Aizen a glance. Aizen gave a light chuckle. "Then I'll have the Triss Espada accompany you." Ryo looked at him sideways, a smirk playing at his lips. "You think I'd be like you and get hung up over a woman?" He'd just heard that Hinamori Momo, the human shield vice captain, still wasn't dead. Aizen had gone out of his way to stab her himself, and she still survived? What, was the girl's heart located in another dimension? But Aizen only smiled. I don't allow myself weakness. Oh? Then I hope you stick to that. After all, the Hogyoku doesn't grant every wish. Ryo didn't press further. He understood well. Momo surviving wasn't about Aizen caring for her. No. Deep down, Aizen had once dreamed of giving up power, finding a few like-minded allies, and living a peaceful life. That was his weakness. A few moments later, Aizen walked off on his own. Ryo stood there in silence before turning around, facing Nemukuro Tsuchi, who had been quietly waiting behind him the whole time. He shrugged. Come on. Let's go gather the data I need. Yes, sir. Nemu replied with a bow, following close behind. As they walked, Ryo let out a soft sigh. In the end, I'm still just waiting for the next chance to cross over. He had to get ready. The little garden was calling. That was his true stage. Chapter 44, Huge gains from the Bleach world in the east area's lower levels of Little Garden, back at the, no-name, base. Ryo let out a sigh the moment he returned. Ah. Now this is what I call a comfortable energy level. Compared to the Rishi density in the Soul Society, the ambient energy down here in Little Garden was much more in tune with Ryo's body. Well then. Time to check what I brought back. He adjusted his breathing and got used to the gravity again before starting to sort through everything he'd gained during his time in the Bleach world. Just then, the dimensional forum in his soul buzzed. Ding, Little Garden Central Core is currently observing the forum holder. Would you like to block the observation? Yes, no, I can actually block it. Ryo raised an eyebrow and focused on the forum, digging around a bit until he found the detailed explanation under his profile icon. Turns out that once the dimensional forum allowed observation from the Little Garden Core, it granted limited administrative access. That meant Ryo could hide certain personal data. And even block observation to some extent. This notification wouldn't normally pop up, but since he'd just returned from another world, the core had resumed its observation automatically. So the two of you, Forum and Central Core, basically signed some kind of mutual benefits agreement, huh? Dumb and Dumber. Muttering under his breath, Ryo skimmed the info and eventually chose no. Meaning he allowed the core to observe him again. And sure enough, almost immediately afterward, the white gift card inside his mind started to tremble. Then, 4 lines of text began to surface, each describing a new gift, Hogyoku, gift, Zunpacto, gift, Rishi Control, and, gift, Domain Sonido, gift, Hogyoku, a manifestation of the soul, a gift that guides latent potential, draws out one's inner power according to the user's will, possesses near mortality on par with gods, rating, 4-digit, exceptional tier, gift, Zunpacto, a gift forged from the soul, shaped by one's deepest wish, rating, 5-digit, growth type, gift, Rishi Control, a gift granting manipulation over microscopic Rishi, the spirit particles, rating, 5-digit, gift, Domain Sonido, a spatial displacement gift, rooted in the manipulation of space, rating, 5-digit, 4 new gifts, now permanently etched onto his gift card. Ryo gave a soft whistle. A 4-digit rank for a boosted Hogyoku, huh? Not a surprise, considering how overpowered it is. The Zunpacto being 5-digit makes sense, too. It grows as I grow. But seriously. I picked up all those spells and techniques. Kido, Bakudo, Sero. And they're all just lumped together as Rishi Control? And Sonido? That's just a Hollow's movement trick. How'd that end up rated 5-digit on its own? Ryo stared at the list, mulling over the deeper implications. I had a feeling when I read the forum's descriptions earlier. And now it's confirmed. He let out a half laugh, half groan. So the Little Garden Core is basically a glorified appraisal machine now, huh? Guess I can just drag anything weird I find back home and let it ID it for me. Honestly, if the core hadn't pointed it out, he wouldn't have realized that Sonido, a technique used by Hollows, had merged with his domain divinity, turning into a legit space-shifting gift rated at 5-digit level. In Little Garden terms, a gift's rating meant its maximum potential output. If Ryo fully mastered Sonido, then just that technique alone would qualify him as a quasi-god. Way beyond any normal Hollow speed technique. Still, the most valuable thing I brought back wasn't any of this. He muttered with a smirk, rolling his neck. It's the experience. The battles with Anohana. The clash with Yamamoto. Ryo, who used to be hopeless in a fight, had now crossed swords with 2 of the strongest people in the entire Bleach world. And lived to tell the tale. He could even pass for a decent swordsman now. That was all thanks to the Hogyoku unlocking his potential and fast-tracking his combat growth. Now then, the last thing. He opened the dimensional forum and checked his points balance. Points, 1020, a message flashed. You answered Aizen's invitation question and received a 5-star rating. Plus 1,000 points. Aizen gave me 5 stars? Yeah, right. That's probably just the forum making stuff up. Ryo scoffed, then clicked into the points tab again. Only to see a new option pop up. Would you like to spend 1,000 points to search for redeemable items? What? He blinked. I only have 1,020 points. You're telling me I gotta spend 1,000 just to search? And then only have 20 left to actually buy something? That's straight up robbery. His eye twitched. Holding back the urge to curse, he stood up from the couch and headed toward the kitchen. His mood needed serious repair. And food was the fix. As he walked into the dining room, he ran straight into Black Rabbit, who was carrying a steaming bowl of ramen. They locked eyes in the doorway. Thanks. Before she could even respond, Ryo snatched the bowl from her hands and immediately dug in. Hey. That was my midnight snack. Black Rabbit shrieked, her face contorting in disbelief. Forget that you stole my ramen. Didn't you say this morning that you were going to be gone for a few days? You left at 10 a.m. and now you're back at midnight. How is that even a few days? It's only been 14 hours. Ryo said mid-slurp, raising an eyebrow. That meant one day in the Bleach world was about 1 hour in Little Garden. The time ratio actually lined up pretty well. Forget the time difference. You finished all the noodles. And drank most of the soup. Black Rabbit looked like she was about to cry. She'd worked hard to make that food, and she was starving. Watching someone else eat it in front of her was pure torture. Seeing her so upset actually cheered Ryo up a little. He chuckled. Eating your ramen is a sign of respect. Be honored. You absolute jerk. She rolled up her sleeves, fire in her eyes. Looks like someone needs to learn what it means to respect your elders. But before she could unleash her wrath, she paused and pulled a small card from her pocket. Palm-sized, white with blue edges and intricate symbols stitched across its surface. It started glowing softly. A familiar voice came through the light. Yo, Black Rabbit? Tell that Ryo kid to swing by my place tomorrow morning. I'm off to watch the Love Goddesses fashion show. By Shiroisha's voice faded with a twinkle. Ryo placed the now empty bowl on the tray Black Rabbit was holding. Tomorrow morning, huh? Guess I better get to bed early. He turned to leave. But didn't get far before Black Rabbit grabbed his arm, eyes blazing, hair turning pink in anger. I don't care what you're doing tomorrow. You're making me another bowl of ramen. Yourself. Ryo was about to refuse, but seeing her determined expression, he paused. Then sighed. Alright, you win. As he headed toward the kitchen, he scratched his head. Was she just mad about the ramen? Or was this her way of being affectionate? Hard to tell with this bunny. She was a complete mystery. Chapter 45, Letitia's Test 9 a.m., Thousand Eyes Headquarters. Led by Miss Julie, Ryo arrived at the Thousand Eyes base dressed in typical Hugo Mundo attire. Before long, he reached the guest room. After waiting a bit, a drowsy and grumpy voice came from inside. Let Ryo in already. Seriously, so early in the morning? Can't the girl get a few more minutes of sleep? Julie stepped aside, sliding the door open and gesturing him in. Please, go ahead. Ryo entered the room and immediately saw the infamous Shiroisha seated behind a tea table. Wearing panda pajamas. His eye twitched ever so slightly at the sight, but he understood, this was Shiroisha's way of showing she didn't see him as an outsider. It was subtle, but gestures like this were why Ryo, someone from a no-name community, could move freely through a major player like Thousand Eyes. In fact, at this point, the intelligence branch probably had him unofficially categorized under directly attached to Shiroisha. You little. Huh? Shiroisha rubbed her eyes, barely squinting at Ryo, and then her expression changed. Who's that inside your soul? Her look turned weirdly serious. She stared at him for a moment, then muttered with a strange tone, don't fight it. I'm pulling that person out for a chat. Realizing what she meant, Ryo didn't resist. He walked over to the tea table and sat down across from her. Right then, a woman materialized beside him, silver-haired, graceful, dressed in a black kimono, with 2 horns atop her head. It was Byakuya, the spirit of Ryo's Zanpakuto. She looked like a grown-up version of Shiroisha herself. The moment Shiroisha laid eyes on her, her face twisted in disbelief. This woman. That's my energy signature, and your soul wavelength? Holy crap, did you make me a daughter? What the hell? As Ryo prepared the tea, he rolled his eyes. Don't twist it. She's just the result of the powers you gave me mixing with my soul and Zanpakuto. Nothing more. Shiroisha clutched her head in frustration, staring at the elegant Byakuya like she'd seen a ghost. Still counts. I'm technically still a kid myself, and I already have a daughter? This is absurd. Ryo's lips twitched again. Shiroisha, whose age was equal to the history of Little Garden, calling herself a kid. Seriously? She had no shame at all. Boring. Byakuya muttered coldly, casting a glance at Shiroisha, her so-called mother, before she closed her eyes, preparing to fade away. But Shiroisha reached out and locked her in place with a casual flick of power, grinning as she did. "Ah, what a stubborn little thing. Come on, give mommy a smile." Byakuya calmly stared down at her, expression icy and aloof. "You're even more disappointing than I imagined." "Nope, this won't do at all." Shiroisha shook her head and snapped open her folding fan. "With that look and attitude, you should be using the royal we or one, and acting way more arrogant. You're the descendant of my son authority, remember? Hold your head high and look at everyone like they're bugs. Got it?" Byakuya fell silent. Ryo shot her a look, silently urging her to just go along with it, unless she wanted this hyperactive star spirit to drag things out forever. Byakuya glanced back at him, sighed, then turned to Shiroisha. "This one is tired," she said flatly, then immediately dematerialized. This time, Shiroisha didn't stop her. It's son-dear type, huh? I like it. And she's got my grown-up looks too. Damn, am I really that hot? Fanning herself proudly, Shiroisha looked totally pleased with herself. Ryo couldn't help but speak up. Byakuya isn't too fond of you, you know. Maybe try not being so pervy? Shiroisha rolled her eyes and smacked him lightly with her fan. Oh, shut it. You're also from my lineage after taking the divinity I made. Even if you didn't inherit my lustful tendencies, don't go bad-mouthing me. Ryo sighed. No point arguing with this one. Shiroisha twirled her fan and said wistfully, such a shame though. If you were just a bit stronger, like hit the 4-digit rank, I could have used that daughter of ours to impersonate me. Could totally fool some people. Imagine the chaos. As she smirked to herself, Ryo finally cut in. You called me here not even a day later. What's the real reason? If he didn't redirect her now, he had a feeling she'd go completely off the rails. Snap. Shiroisha closed her fan and tapped her shoulder with the handle. Right. Time to get down to business. I was gonna give you a surprise, but turns out you gave me one instead. Now look, any 3-digit ranked person who sees you is gonna assume we've got something going on. She sighed exaggeratedly. Byakuya's aura and posture were way too similar to hers. With a little grooming, she could have passed as Shiroisha herself. Which, obviously, could cause some misunderstandings. Oh well. She chuckled. Kinda fun in its own way. I'll help you conceal her later, she'll be one of our trump cards. Clapping her hands, she shifted focus again. Now, back to business. She looked at Ryo with a sly smile. Yesterday I negotiated with some folks tied to Thousand Eyes. Things went really smoothly. They agreed immediately. You've got some serious luck. What exactly did they agree to? Ryo raised an eyebrow. Shiroisha tapped her palm with her fan. It's about a combat mentor. Ryo blinked. You found me a teacher? Yup. She nodded enthusiastically. And not just any teacher, a real badass. Experience, raw power, down in the lower layers of Little Garden, known as the Knight of Little Garden. Ryo's mind jumped to a certain name, Letitia Draculae. A pure-blooded vampire, one of the rarest to exist. She was the overall floor master in Little Garden. A former high-ranking officer in Arcadia. One of the oldest living beings since the dawn of the garden itself. Only someone like that would earn Shiroisha's high praise. So she found Letitia to be my teacher. Or maybe Letitia volunteered herself. Ryo narrowed his eyes, a faint smile curling on his lips. A teacher, huh? Works for me. I could use some expert guidance. Whoa, hold on a second. Shiroisha waved her fan. You think just because you want to learn, she wants to teach you? Oh, so there's a catch? Ryo's tone turned amused. Ding 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 tilde. Shiroisha pointed her fan toward the window, gesturing east. Before sunset today, you'll be heading out to fight the water god that resides outside the gates at the edge of the world. That's your entrance exam, Letitia's test for taking you on as a disciple. She smiled sweetly, hiding mischief behind her fan. Better think this through, Ryo. That water god is a 5-digit serpent deity, born way stronger than any demigod. You sure you're up for this? Ryo grinned slowly. Sounds fun. Chapter 47, Rule Over All. Byakuya just at the edge of the Little Garden world. The place where all rivers converged into a colossal waterfall at the end of the world. After Ryo had passed his trial, Shiroisha led him to the outer city gate. Kid, once you step through this gate, you're officially outside the city limits. From there, just cross the forest and you'll reach the edge of the great waterfall. That's where the water god's been training. Shiroisha pointed eastward, then fanned herself lazily with a sly smile. There's still time to back out, you know. Even among 5-digit rankers, there's a big difference in power levels. The water god at the Tritonus Falls has been training for centuries to become a dragon. She's no pushover. Even among 5-digit beings, she's considered top tier. But don't forget, humans with divine authority are considered the gatekeepers of the 5-digit class. So are you sure you want to go up against an ancient serpent god? There was a glint of amusement in Shiroisha's eyes, and her grin had a mischievous edge. She clearly wanted Ryo to take the bait and go challenge the water god. Probably just for the fun of watching him struggle. Ryo knew exactly what she was doing. But he wasn't worried about losing. If anything, he was more curious. How long will it take me to beat her? In the original story, Izatwe had barely tangled with the water god before knocking her out cold with a single punch. Sure, Izatwe's body was absurd. He entered the game already at a 4-digit level. But even so, the water god's performance was underwhelming. It didn't leave Ryo feeling even a little intimidated. No matter how much Shiroisha hyped her up, he figured she was just bluffing. He was itching to test his fists. Still, she's a water god who's trained for centuries. I should at least take this seriously if we're fighting head-on. That thought sobered his expression. Losing after giving it everything you've got is one thing. Losing because you got cocky? That's just unacceptable. Noticing his change in attitude, Shiroisha grinned like a fox. So? You accepting the challenge, or not? I'm in. With that, Ryo stepped forward and walked through the outer gate, leaving Little Garden city limits behind. Shiroisha watched him go, her grin widening. Newbies always think they can ignore their seniors. Hope the kid doesn't get his face pounded in too badly. Just then, her shadow stretched unnaturally along the ground, lengthening out until a small figure emerged from it. A blonde girl, wearing a red and black jacket and a black ribbon tied at the back of her head, rose smoothly from the darkness. It was none other than Letitia Draculi. Hiding in Shiroisha's shadow, as usual. Lady Shiroisha, if I recall, isn't the water god of Tritonus Falls one of your subordinates? Ah, yeah. She's under my Yasha authority. Gave her divinity a couple 100 years ago, I think. Shiroisha waved her fan casually, eyes gleaming with mischief. That little snake's the illegitimate daughter of the North Sea Dragon King. The old geezer left her in my care. Her bloodline's not bad at all. Letitia sighed softly. For someone who only just gained divinity, this trial might be a bit too much. Among the Dragonkin, a huge chunk of their power comes from their bloodline. And as a Dragon King's daughter, even a bastard, her spiritual potential would naturally far surpass any humans. So a serpent god with royal dragon blood? That's definitely high tier, even among phantasmal beasts. Frankly, someone like that might be too strong for Ryo right now. But if the opponent's not strong enough, how else am I supposed to draw out his full power and see what he's made of? Shiroisha fanned herself and chuckled. Besides, that kid went and used some gift to make a fake daughter version of me. If I don't teach him a lesson, what's next? Is he gonna pop out a few grand gifts for me? I'm still a pure, untainted maiden, you know. Letitia gave her a side eye but held back her thoughts. For a high-ranking being in Little Garden, Shiroisha was already unusually easygoing. A few petty quirks were something subordinates had to accept. And compared to all the help she'd given Ryo, this little bit of mischief was nothing. Shiroisha closed her fan and looked at Letitia, smiling. So, what do you think? Will he pick the trial of strength, or the trial of wits? The Water God's gift game had 2 trial options. Something most people in the outer gates were already familiar with. After all, challengers had been coming for hundreds of years. Strength. Letitia answered without hesitation. He just awakened divinity and can already manipulate elemental forces. For a human, that's excellent combat talent. That kind of confidence will push him toward the strength trial. Ha. That's what I figured too. Shiroisha waved her fan again, and the space in front of them shimmered like a ripple across water. A large circular portal appeared, projecting a view of the phantasmal beast forest. He's just got a new gift. It's almost guaranteed he'll pick a strength-based trial. Still, if he had chosen the wit trial, he might have had a decent chance at winning. Letitia didn't change expression. You don't trust the serpent god's intelligence, do you? Shiroisha was barely avoiding saying it outright. That the water god was dumb. She just nodded in response. Even if she's Dragonkin, her mother's side isn't the brightest. And let's be real. Humanity's greatest strengths are their intellect and adaptability. If the kid had played it smart and picked the trial of wits, he probably could have passed. Letitia said nothing. She just stared at the image before her, and after a pause of a few seconds, sighed softly. He picked strength. Tritonus falls, riding the fire of his divinity like a battering ram. Ryo cut straight through the phantasmal beast forest and reached the lake beside the great waterfall. His aggressive presence didn't go unnoticed. Beneath the surface, something massive stirred. A giant figure slowly rose from the water. White serpent scales glinting, two black horns atop her head, golden slit pupils locked on Ryo. Humphrey. Bold of you to throw around that kind of spiritual pressure in my domain. This is Tritonus Falls, and I am its master. A fledgling human god, huh? So, you're here to challenge me? Ryo looked up at the towering snake goddess. Her upper body alone stretched dozens of meters into the air. His gaze sharpened. All right. I underestimated you. The serpent god snorted, steam puffing from her nostrils. You know the rules, right? Trial of strength, or trial of wits? Strength. Ryo replied immediately. Oh. Got guts. Her golden eyes narrowed playfully. Well then, I hope when you die, you won't come back as some vengeful spirit. Relax. Ryo cracked his neck with a grin. Even if I die, I won't hunt someone like you. Cocky little punk. She yawned, jaws wide. I'll be fair. First strike is yours. You only get one shot. Oh? Ryo's body tensed for just a moment. Then, without hesitation, he drew his Zanpakuto. Spiritual pressure surged, swelling to a boiling point. The atmosphere around him trembled. Shikai. Rule over all. By Arcadia. In a flash, he transformed. White hair, black horns, demonic aura radiating like a storm. What? The serpent god's eyes went wide. Just before Ryo vanished from her sight. The next thing she saw was a fist, rapidly growing in her pupils until it filled her entire vision. Boom. Chapter 48, Water Tree above the lake. The water god was floating upside down, belly up in the water like a dead fish, her massive body twisted in defeat. Standing right on her stomach, Ryo looked a little confused. He clenched his fist experimentally, then tilted his head and muttered with a strange expression. I barely even tried. You're already down? Was this snake really ranked in the 5-digit class? Ryo's skeptical gaze said it all. He'd only used a combo, a momentum shift plus a straight punch technique he'd picked up from Yamamoto Genryuzai. That was it. And yet, with just those two moves, the serpent goddess had collapsed. Just like that. Before coming to this world, Ryo had heard rumors that this particular serpent goddess was the embarrassment of the 5-digit tier. But he always thought that was just a joke. Turns out, it wasn't. The serpent water goddess stirred below, her head slowly rising from the water. Ryo could feel her body struggling beneath his feet, the frustration almost palpable. With a splash, the serpent goddess lifted her head and bellowed in fury, "You shameless cheat! In all my years of life, I've never met a spirit so disgustingly brazen. A monstrous being with world-shaking power, and you dare pretend to be some weak little human? You despicable scoundrel! Whoever you are. Spirit god number 16. I, the great serpent goddess, name you the most shameless creature alive." With that, the serpent goddess let out a final pained groan and collapsed back into the water with a loud splash, her body twitching as she moaned in agony. She wanted nothing more than to rip Ryo to pieces. A spirit type with a top-tier bloodline among the 5-digit ranks, and she had actually believed he was just a regular human? He'd completely fooled her and lured her into a trap. Weren't spirit types supposed to be straightforward and loudmouthed? Bold older brothers and warm-hearted older sisters, wasn't that the stereotype? This guy. He must be some weird subspecies of spirits. A devil in disguise. No. Even the most underhanded devils weren't this sneaky. This guy was on another level entirely. An absolute scoundrel. The more she thought about it, the more furious she got. And the angrier she was, the more her body ached. A spirit type's punch wasn't something you could just walk off. A spirit at the 5-digit level could rip a mountain out of the ground and use it as a baseball bat. And she'd taken a direct hit to the face. Worse, it wasn't just any punch. It was a focused, technique-driven strike she'd never seen before, one that condensed Ryo's bizarre strength into a devastating blow. The only reason she was still alive was probably because of her superior lineage. That punch. Only someone in the 4-digit class could survive it. So yes. This bastard pretending to be a weakling was absolutely the lowest of the low. It's over. Letitia stared at the water mirror in front of her, face calm and composed. Beside her, Shiroisha was hiding behind her fan, practically dying of second-hand embarrassment. She looked like she was one step away from digging a hole and burying herself in it. She'd just been going on and on about how Ryo would need clever tactics to beat the serpent goddess. And now? Slap. Slap. Reality had just smacked her in the face. Hard. What the hell just happened? A 5-digit class divine beast with dragon lineage and centuries of training got one-shotted? Since when were 5 digits this fragile? And how the hell did we end up with such a weak snake? What the hell was the North Sea Dragon King thinking? Sure, Rio had that spirit transformation blessing or whatever. But still. That shouldn't have ended the fight this fast. Would it kill you to at least put up the fight? Give me some face here. Shiroisha's face was twitching, but she forced herself to act dignified and said, well done, well done. Beating Shiryuki so easily. It's just as I expected. Really? Letitia shot her a sidelong glance, eyebrow raised. Shiroisha clearly felt the judgment in that look, and awkwardly wobbled her fan as she added, haha, yeah, you know. Back when the North Sea Dragon King begged me on his knees to take in his illegitimate daughter, I already suspected she didn't have much combat talent. Weren't you just praising her bloodline a minute ago? Letitia didn't say anything, letting Shiroisha save face, but she couldn't help glancing at her again with an expression that practically screamed. For real? Feeling her pride start to crack, Shiroisha quickly changed the subject. Anyway, since Rio won so fast, I guess our original goal wasn't exactly achieved. Should we add another trial? Letitia let out a small sigh. No need, Lady Shiroisha. The agreement was to guide the one who passes the serpent goddess's trial. Since that's what happened, we should honor our word. Then she looked over and added pointedly, besides, isn't Rio one of your own? Sure, her own snake lost so fast it was embarrassing. But the one who won? That was yours too. Letitia's gaze even held a trace of comfort, like she was trying to reassure Shiroisha. Ah, that's true. You're right. Ha ha ha. Shiroisha laughed awkwardly. After all, he got his divinity from my Sun authority. It's only natural he'd beat someone from my Yasha authority. Speaking of which, man, the Buddhist authorities have been getting lamer by the year. Those baldies are really falling off lately. Her Sun authority was her original divine identity. The Yasha authority? That was a second-rate one the Buddhist faction handed out for free. Shiroisha's translation, the serpent goddess's poor performance was Buddhism's fault. Not hers. Meanwhile, Ryo's strength? Clearly a result of her excellent judgment. Look at him. A kid this talented, and she had the foresight to give him a god-class authority onto her Sun domain. Now that's what you call taste. Letitia just rolled her eyes and cast a light avoidance blessing on herself before spreading her bat wings. I'll go announce the results, she said, floating into the air. You do that. Shiroisha waved casually. As Letitia flew off, Shiroisha turned back to the water mirror, where the serpent goddess still lay unconscious like a dead whale. Her face darkened, nose practically twitching with rage. You useless pig. What the hell have you been doing for the last few centuries? Crack. She snapped her folding fan in two with a furious twist. Damn it. If you weren't so good-looking, I'd skin you alive tonight. Humphrey. With a cold snort, Shiroisha narrowed her eyes, staring at the fallen goddess, her thoughts unclear. At the waterfall, Rio was busy raiding Shiryuki's treasure vault. According to the rules, the victor of the trial was allowed to take one gift from the serpent goddess's hoard as a reward. Trash. Oh? High-quality rice with a yield of 10 tons per acre? Not bad. But not what I'm here for. After some digging, Rio finally found what he was looking for. One of the original story's gifts buried in her exclusive vault. Water tree. A gift that naturally gathers moisture from the air and produces an endless supply of high-quality living water. It was rated as a 5-digit tier item. Why? Because the water it created wasn't just clean. It was rich in energy and perfect for enhancing growth. A high-value, high-utility production gift. With this thing, he could literally make a fortune selling water. And for No Name, who had lots of land but no water source, it was the perfect solution. Perfect? I'll take this one. Rio stored the water tree and looked over at the snake goddess foaming at the mouth nearby. He couldn't help but laugh a little. They were technically both under the authority of the same god after all, so out of some decency, he dragged her unconscious body back into her cave under the lake before swimming back to shore. Just as he reached the edge, his eyes narrowed slightly and turned toward the forest. You've grown a lot, haven't you? Letitia's voice, gentle and nostalgic, drifted through the trees as she slowly stepped into view. Chapter 49, Dragon's Shadow. Ryo's eyes lifted slightly as he looked at the blonde girl in front of him. Young in appearance, but carrying the composure of someone far more mature. A faint smile curled at his lips. Long time no see, Lady Letitia. It's been about half a year, hasn't it? Letitia's voice carried a hint of melancholy, contrasting Ryo's calm tone. Who would have thought? In just 6 months, Arcadia, once a dominant force in the higher levels, had lost its name and was now barely surviving at the very bottom. And who could have imagined that Ryo, someone Canaria had brought back purely out of curiosity and goodwill, would become No Name's greatest source of hope. On the flip side, Letitia herself, once a high-ranking officer leading battles, was now a prisoner. With complicated feelings swirling inside, Letitia looked at Ryo's smiling face and murmured, "You already figured it out, didn't you?" She was referring to the fact that she'd be taking on the role of Ryo's martial arts instructor. Ryo chuckled lightly. Wasn't Lady Shiroisha's hint a bit too obvious? And besides, down here in the lower levels of Little Garden, the only ones willing to help, No Name, during times like this, are former members. The demon lord who attacked Arcadia was still unidentified. With the enemy in the shadows while they were exposed, even Arcadia's old allies were hesitant to act. They were likely waiting for the right moment. Letitia sighed softly. "If you've already figured that much out, I suppose I don't need to explain anything else." She glanced at the nearby lake, then back at Ryo with a faint frown. "I don't know how you managed to grow this much in just one day. But that's not the point." Looking at him with a trace of exasperation, she added, "I was planning to use that snake as a benchmark to test your limits and get a baseline for your training. But things clearly didn't go according to plan. Honestly, not even Shiroisha expected this." Letitia added that last part silently in her mind. Just yesterday, Shiroisha had been singing Ryo's praises, saying she believed in his potential and that he'd grow quickly. But this was way beyond what even Shiroisha anticipated. If she had known, there's no way she would have chosen a trial opponent who got one shot by Ryo. Ryo's growth rate was definitely out of the ordinary. Was it that hidden talent of his? Letitia narrowed her eyes, recalling something Canaria once told her, that kid's potential might just be the highest among all humans.